creating this video is for educational purposes. I'm here responding to Shawn Baker's recent video that he's posted entitled Debunking More Vegan Nonsense. Apparently Shawn has debunked some vegan nonsense in the past, but he doesn't do that very successfully here. I'm going to go through and point out some of those missed opportunities on Shawn's part to present vegan arguments or popular vegan arguments in their entirety, or in more valid, honest manner with more objectivity. What Shawn's doing is he's distorting popular vegan arguments. Keep in mind as you go through and view this that Shawn is not actually quoting, he doesn't even claim to be quoting anybody. This is just his misinterpretations and misrepresentations of popular vegan arguments. They're not the whole vegan arguments. Let's go through now. But before we do, if we go right to his video site and we scroll right through, we get a clue of what's going on. We see no scientific references being integrated by anybody following Shawn. And he's got a lot of viewers. What does that tell you? What does tell you, it does coincide with the fact that people who consume carnivorous diets don't really look much for scientific evidence because there's not much scientific evidence to support it. What they're doing is they're kind of latching on to an authoritative figure, and Shawn's taking the role of an authority in this carnivorous movement. They tend to endorse values of inequality and hierarchical thinking. This is just the tendency. It doesn't always apply. They also tend to value social dominance and authoritative views.
So the theory is that you have to be, an herbivore to develop atherosclerosis. And so
this is somewhat true. There are some extreme or unnatural conditions. There's endothelium damage, or there's thyroidectomy performed on a lab animal. For some unknown reason, thyroidectomies induce atherosclerosis, or at least the last I saw in the literature. But anyway, these are not natural conditions where carnivores are acquiring sporadic atherosclerosis. And of course, they're fed high-fat diets, not high-fiber.
So, unfortunately, there is data in the literature that clearly shows that that's not correct. In fact, this study behind me was a study done several years back looking at domestic cats, which most people would agree are carnivorous animals. And it shows very clearly that those domestic cats can develop atherosclerotic lesions. And that was done feeding them yes, a higher fat diet, but also their diet had cat food, grains, and that stuff in there.
Okay, so he's got a hybridized domesticated cat from this old study, fed a higher fat diet, he says, along with standard cat food, grains, and stuff. Well, cats aren't granivores anyway, so there's nothing really relevant about this example at all. This is really digging to the bottom of the barrel for this old example.
Interestingly,
this is the first example. And this is not, so this exceedingly rare, unnatural example that, as his first example, that's supposed to be debunking a vegan myth, is, it's not applicable because with this, atherosclerosis is very common among humans. And it's very serious. So if you look at the frequency, we're talking about 70% of the population is walking around with atherosclerosis in the adult population. This is not a small, insignificant, rare example of atherosclerosis, so it's very common.
This association with atherosclerotic plaque development was triglyceride level in those cats, and so interestingly enough, human beings also.
Okay, so no surprise, nothing new here. Triglycerides is just another biomarker for atherosclerosis, along with LDL and total cholesterol levels. If the critical thinker is going to just ask, what is the diet? It's inversely related to all three of these, and it would be a high-fiber diet. It's not a meat diet, it's a high-fiber diet. I'm going to skip on over to about 3 minutes and 57 minutes into the video, where Shawn brings out the example of the gorilla.
Gorilla specifically, okay? Because a gorilla is a primate, and arguably humans are primates. And so
it's not arguably humans are primates, but humans are classified as primates according to the Linnaeus system of taxonomy. Linnaeus introduced the system of taxonomy. which has been refined, but this modern view of the classification of all species is not just to put different species into these neat, non-overlapping separate bins for categorization, but it also gives you kind of a big picture view of the interrelatedness among different species and what they have in common. And when you're talking about carnivores, you're talking about terrestrial mammals that are in the carnivore order, but humans are primates, and humans are not in that order. So that's 3 ranks up in the Linnaeus taxonomic ranking system. That's a big difference. So it goes from general to specific. At the species level and maybe subspecies level, you're talking about relatively more details. But these are not just small details that separate humans from carnivores. Humans have none of these characteristic traits among carnivores.
The average sort of male silverback gorilla is around 300 pounds or so, maybe a little bit bigger, and they've got some decent muscle on them often.
Yes, they often do have some decent muscle on them. For instance, a typical gorilla that's 300 pounds would be stronger than any human that ever lived or ever will live, because he's got a higher ratio of fast twitch muscle fibers, and even chimpanzees do, but gorillas even more so. You see with chimpanzees it's a 67% to 40% in comparison with humans. I'm getting a little lag here.
I'm about 250 pounds, just for perspective.
For perspective, the gorilla is about 3 or 4 times stronger than you, but I don't know how this has kind of devolved into just a video about how much muscle you can acquire.
What does an average day of eating look like for the silverback gorilla? Well, they eat 40 pounds. That's right, 40 pounds of vegetation every single day to put on that sort of size. They spend 80% of their waking hours chewing, constantly chewing, because that nutritional quality is so low.
This is incorrect. The nutritional quality among wild primates is actually much higher. If we look here at Milton, has provided just a little bit of a table here showing some of the more non-insignificant nutrients like calcium, many times higher ratios of calcium among wild primates, and the same with potassium, magnesium, even iron and manganese. That's the same with vitamin C as well. And look, we find no wild primate widespread deficiency diseases in among wild primate populations. So here we see exponentially more vitamin C intake among wild primates. So it's not that their nutrition is so poor. You might learn something.
But it takes them that much food and that much chewing time to be able to obtain that muscle. So that would be the equivalent.
They're not chewing to obtain muscle. I don't know what the narrow focus is on muscle. Most of the video is about how big you can get, how much muscle you can get.
Eating about 34 pounds of food a day to maintain my muscle size, which obviously I'm not going to do. I don't want to spend 80% of my time chewing. In fact, if we look...
But the question really, Shawn, is will you spend 100% of your time with atherosclerosis? Because if we look into the demographics of people 51 to 60 years of age, for instance, and I'm estimating, but you're talking about a 95% of those people in that age range for humans have atherosclerosis. So how much chewing you're doing, irrelevant. Risk of atherosclerosis in trying to determine biochemically compatible diet, very relevant. But this just doesn't seem to be a concern with Shawn. He's worried more about convenience than he is nutrition.
At the anthropologic records looking at early humans based on jaw structure, it was estimated that early humans spent approximately 4% of their time chewing. And so that's a dramatic departure from what we see with gorillas at 80%. And chimpanzees who eat arguably a little bit more nutritious diet because they tend to include more fruit in the diet, they spend 65% of their time chewing. Now remember, we've had primate animals that have been eating a fruit-based diet for arguably about 25 million years. They did not grow a big brain.
There's one thing is not associated with the other. It doesn't matter how much meat you consume, it doesn't matter how much fruit you consume. brain size is determined by genetic instructions, not determined by what kind of food that you eat. If it were that simplistic, then you can just blend a bunch of blueberries and you don't have to chew it all, and then you can have a bigger brain.
Still have the same size, small 200, 300, 400 cc brain that they had 25 million years ago. It was not until humans started eating meat that we grew that big brain.
That's false. Even in the primate lineage in general, you'll find that they generally have higher, increased brain size over time.
So the other interesting thing about gorillas and many other primates is they do something called coprophagia. Coprophagia means they eat their own poop.
Okay, so he's not really providing any relevant references, but he's got this photo for the impressionistic followers to see that a gorilla is consuming poop, as though there are any vegans that are actually advocating this. So what exactly he's debunking, I don't know, but he spends a lot of time talking about coprophagia. So I'm going to skip over this irrelevant stuff here and on to his next example.
The world's biggest animal, the biggest animal in the world by far, is a mammal called a blue whale. And a blue whale is a strict carnivore.
Now we're just talking about the biggest animal, not the most muscle mass, but the biggest.
And the blue whale, this will be the next topic. So the next topic is that in order to be a carnivore, you have to have long claws and sharp pointy teeth, and you have to run down and bite.
No, not necessarily, but those are just the more common traits. The fact is that humans have none of the carnivorous traits that classify species into the carnivore order. This is not a terrestrial mammal here. The blue whale is another non-example. So just because it doesn't have carnassials, canines, the lockjaw, and all that, that doesn't mean it's not a true carnivore.
Your prey by the neck to obtain food. That's the only way you could possibly be a carnivore. So
no, you can be a behavioral carnivore. The only relevant topic is are you a biological carnivore? Can you biologically procure meats reliably, and is it healthy? Is it for you? Do you even have the psychological makeup, the killer instincts, the predator reflexes of a carnivore? No, you have none. You're providing no examples of real carnivorous traits in people. None throughout this whole video. Aren't you supposed to be debunking vegans?
Because humans don't have long claws and long teeth, and we don't run super fast and latch onto our prey with our teeth, we therefore cannot possibly eat meat. Well, let's look at the blue whale. Again, the blue whale doesn't have long claws. It doesn't have teeth. And those things.
These are balines, or balines rather. They're these keratin fibers. They filter out krill and other foods. And Shawn, you don't have these either. You don't have canines. You don't have these, and this is irrelevant.
All they do is siphon krill. They are carnivores without long, pointy teeth or long claws. And there are many examples of carnivorous animals in the wild that don't.
No, there aren't.
Don't have those same features. Let's talk about humans adopted tool usage. And some people say, well, it's not fair, you can't use tools. No other animal uses tools.
Well, that's irrelevant. I use tools when I eat. Again, the issue is not do you use tools to eat, and if you do, you're not a carnivore. The issue is you have none of the natural faculties for procuring and safely digesting, or even the psychological wherewithal or the capacity to with predator reflexes. You have none.
In fact, it is absolutely incorrect. There are many animals in the wild that do use tools to obtain food. And we can start with many of the primates like chimps, gorillas.
Alright, I'm just going to skip over that point. He just goes through a list of animals that use tools, and somehow that's supposed to debunk what? I don't know.
There's pH, gastric pH. A lot of people will say, well, humans don't have a very acidic stomach, and we're more like herbivores. That's absolutely patently false. I mean, almost all the data out there that's easily findable shows that humans, healthy humans, have a gastric pH of about 1 to 1.5.
Now, for impressionistic followers, this would sound like he's finally got a point towards the end of the video. But when we actually look at the literature at this topic, we find that the gastric pH that he's talking about is on an empty stomach. Carnivores can maintain that low pH on a full stomach, whereas humans, that gastric pH goes up to 4 to 5. And here we see Milton describes this. Carnivores are able to keep that gastric pH at 1 to 2, even with food in. That's what's relevant, when the food is in it. And still, we have dogs with higher stomach acid than humans, and this is why they can consume food with salmonella and E. coli, and they may still acquire these diseases, but it's just not as likely. And so stomach acid is just one aspect of digestion. We can also think about the enzymatic activity. Some would say it's less important or less relevant, but it's all relevant, really. And then the mechanical digestion is the other factor, too, that's being overlooked. And then when you look at primates in general, the larger they are, the more fiber they're consuming, right? The more fruit they're consuming. That's what this graph is showing. And the smaller they are, the more animal products they're consuming. These are primates. And why is that? Well, the smaller primates have faster metabolism, so they're going to have more energy-dense, higher macronutrient foods. Just bears reminding that vegan diets can be, when they're well planned, appropriate for all stages of life. Shawn Baker himself is an exception. He's not provided evidence otherwise.
Let's go on the planet, and puts us in category with even more acidic than many actual predators like lions and tigers. We have a pH that is on par with scavenger animals like hyenas, like vultures. Get rid of the notion that human beings are herbivores.
And I just wanted to kind of just clarify that humans are not herbivores. Humans are frugivores, or frugivores is another way to say it. Same thing. Herbivores is not the correct dietary classification for humans. They're not general plant eaters, but fruit is digested most effectively. I've created a video on this already.
Because that's not supported by really any science whatsoever. All right, guys. What else is out there? The other that most people don't eat for the environment. Most people don't eat for ethics. Most people eat because they want nutrition.
Is that true? Most people eat for nutrition. Now you wouldn't know it because think about how many sick people are in our population. The diabetes epidemic, the obesity epidemic. If you look at the cost and the convenience and taste, these are actually, the taste and cost have been more common reasons for people to base their food choices. That's an older study, and that's a peer-reviewed study. But here in an update, you see the trends, even trends in which convenience is and cost is becoming an increasing concern. So that's what's really influencing people to eat. It's not nutrition. If it were, we wouldn't have the obesity and diabetes epidemics, Alzheimer's, etc. So off the mark on that one too. So we've gone through all the major non-points that Shawn is trying to make. Leave the comments below. Let me know if I've missed anything. Thank you for tuning in.